And we want to continue this conversation. For that, we want to bring in Carlos Gutierrez. He is the former Secretary of Commerce under President George W. Bush. And Secretary Gutierrez, it's great to speak with you. Let's start with infrastructure and what Jess was just laying out for us. When we have this plan that President Biden put forward, some progressive Democrats have said that Biden's plan simply just is not enough. And then you have some moderates and Republicans saying that, hey, this is just way too big. What do you think of the president's plan that he has laid out so far? Do we need a bill of this size?
Well, look, I'm always a little bit suspicious, I have to admit, when I see the word infrastructure. It's a very convenient bullet point, but it needs to have a purpose. And $2 trillion is a lot of money. From my point of view, it's on the high side. And especially if you consider that today we have an enormous fiscal deficit. So on top of that fiscal deficit, which is the largest since World War II, we're going to add $2 trillion. So I think we just need to be aware of that. I understand the need for COVID, the need for healthcare, the need for schools, some of the things the president was mentioning, bridges and roads. But a lot of that investment, when you talk about job creation, it's not necessarily long-term jobs. The jobs will be there as long as the infrastructure project is there. And I think we need to be thinking longer term. I haven't heard anything about a digital infrastructure, about putting money into R&D to develop 6G, to spread internet into inner cities and throughout the country. Those are the things that are going to make us competitive. Those are the things that are going to make a difference. I would hate to spend $2 trillion and find out that we haven't gained an edge on China from an economic standpoint.
Secretary Gutierrez, you make a good point, but the Bush administration spent $286 billion on roads and bridges, and they're still crumbling 15 years later. So we need, roads and bridges help keep an economy going years into the future, even past the construction project, don't they?
Yeah, that's true. No question, we have to fix roads and we have to fix bridges, and there's a big difference between 286 and 2 trillion. I don't know how much of the 2 trillion is roads and bridges. Sure, you have to do that, but we're throwing this inside of a $2 trillion package. And this is at a time, it's not just the trade deficit, but there is so much money in the economy that, and the pent up demand is just there. And as soon as we get to a place where people feel a lot more comfortable about COVID, you're going to see real investment and real spending. There's pent up demand. It's going to happen. And as soon as that hits a certain velocity, I think we'll see some inflation. So we just need to be prepared for this future that we're creating. I find it hard to imagine all this money, monetary policy, fiscal policy, $2 trillion in the economy and not seeing inflation, especially when you have pumped up demand and when you have velocity just around the corner. So, it's great that the president's doing something big, but I don't think doing the biggest thing we've ever done is a reason enough to do it. I'd like to see an infrastructure plan with a purpose, and a purpose to make us competitive, a purpose to increase our digital prowess. But look, we'll see. I do think it's on the big side, on the large side, though.
How do you think an infrastructure package should be paid for? And what do you think about the Biden's call to raise the corporate tax rate to 28%?
Well, look, we've had experience with increasing taxes. Most of the time, it's held back growth. I think we do have the advantage of tailwinds because of how static we've been during COVID. So maybe we can get away with it. And I hope that's as far as it goes. But he's talking about other taxes. So, at this point, it just seems pretty normal, tax and spend. And I think we need some political innovation. I would like to see the president get back into some of the trade programs. It's like he's following President Trump's trade philosophy, not President Obama's. President Obama left a great trade deal out in Asia Pacific that President Biden hasn't even talked about, he hasn't addressed. He should be back in the way we got back into Paris. So I'm worried about that. I'm worried about politics taking over trade policy, and we need trade policy in order to compete. So it's still early days, but I'd like to see a little bit more targeted and strategic spending and a little bit more political innovation.
And Secretary, speaking of that, I want to talk a little bit more about trade and investing in China, because when we think about what President Biden has put forward so far, he has said that he will use all available tools to fight China's unfair trade practices. Let's listen to what he has recently said when it comes to trade and China.
I see stiff competition with China. China has an overall goal, and I don't criticize them for the goal, but they have an overall goal to become the leading country in the world, the wealthiest country in the world, and the most powerful country in the world. That's not going to happen on my watch, because the United States is going to continue to grow and expand.
Secretary, you've been involved in trade talks with China. What should Biden's strategy with China be? And do we need to come up, or I guess, does he need to change his approach from what the Trump administration did with their approach with China?
Yeah, no question. I would say two things. One is whatever he wants to tell China, and he should tell China everything he needs to say, everything he wants to say. He should do it in private. We should not be negotiating in public. It doesn't work, and especially doesn't work with China. The second thing I would say is, up until now, our strategy has been to stop China from achieving their strategy. So we're going after their Belt and Road Initiative. We're going after Huawei. We're going after other Chinese companies. I think we need our own strategy. And that's why I'm saying this infrastructure bill should have a purpose. And I believe that purpose should be to increase our competitiveness. Another way is going back to TPP. We need to be in TPP, because if not, we're essentially turning over access to Asian countries to China and others. And China is going to write the rules for trade in Asia. They're going to regionalize Asia. We have the opportunity of signing and getting right back in an agreement that's already been negotiated and is a great agreement. President Trump took it out, I think, a few days after he was elected. I'm not sure he understood what was in there. But to take China on without the leverage of being in TPP, I think is another faulty way of thinking. So we need to think strategically. We need to have our own strategy, and that goes beyond, a $2 trillion stimulus plan that has a lot of different things in it. I'd like to know the strategy. We need our strategy. It's not just about blocking China.
We appreciate your input. Secretary Carlos Gutierrez, former Secretary of Commerce under President George W. Bush. All the best to you, sir.